These are some of the most disturbing crimes that were captured on kiss cams and jumbotrons, and as the video progresses, things only get worse. Imagine calling in sick and taking a break from work, only to end up getting exposed on national TV doing something completely different. On July 16, 2025, Jeff Comeau, a lifelong Tennessee Volunteers fan, found himself in that exact situation. Jeff, who'd been gifted a ticket by a friend to attend the game, was on the edge of his seat as his team was about to suffer a disappointing defeat against the Georgia Bulldogs. And just as the clock wound down, Jeff became animated in the stands, showing a range of emotions, from jumping to cheering to looking worried. And each time the Volunteers made a big play or mistake, the camera would cut back to him, much to the delight of the entire stadium. At one point, he even stood with his arms crossed over his chest as he watched his beloved team in disappointment. He knew that his team might be heading towards another painful loss, but what he didn't realize was that he became the star of the show. And with all of this happening, Jeff had no idea that people were watching him more than the actual game, as the cameras just kept panning to him over and over. And it didn't take long for the clip to surface online, going viral immediately and automatically turning Jeff into the subject of jokes and memes. But what makes this even worse is that Jeff didn't even know he was trending online until after the game, when strangers began recognizing and pointing at him as he was getting out of the stadium. Some guy stood up and said, "That's the guy," and I was like, what did I do? Like I robbed a bank or something. And then the messages started pouring in. Jeff, who's been recognized in several towns, including Chattanooga and Alpharetta, would later react to his viral moment saying, "It's been overwhelming. A lot of text messages. I've been all over the place, all over the internet. The memes are unbelievable, and I'm good with it. I can take it. I'm thick-skinned." Despite the embarrassment, Jeff claimed that the love from fans has been non-stop. "I was relatable because everybody was like, you were me. Honestly, it would have been me at any big game, even at home watching on TV. I'd be standing there just like that." But while Jeff's story ended with him becoming internet famous, this next case involves an individual who lost everything after getting caught on Jumbotron. On January 19, 2020, a man named Davy Andrade was in the stands watching a football game between Barcelona SC and Delphin, and as the game went on, the stadium's kiss cam swept across the crowd, looking for lighthearted moments, but instead it found something else. Unaware that the camera was on him, Davy was caught off guard leaning in to steal a kiss from the woman beside him, who we'll call Alice. But the moment they realized they'd been seen by everyone, their demeanor completely changed. Davy's body stiffened as he pulled away awkwardly, while Alice also looked embarrassed. At this point, the audience at the stadium didn't understand why the couple was acting so weird, but they were about to find out. The same day, a Twitter user named Roger Gonzalez shared the video with the caption, "When you kiss your side chick and realize her marriage is over cause you're on camera." And this tweet immediately went viral, racking up more than 22 million views. And as always, internet users started digging to uncover the real identity of the couple and figure out why they were acting so awkward. And even though it wasn't confirmed if they were married or engaged, multiple pictures showing the two of them with different partners were soon shared online. These pictures would fuel more criticism for both parties, and with the backlash getting worse by the day, Davy was forced to address the issue. However, while many people expected him to apologize to his partner, or at least admit his mistakes, he decided to take a different route. In a statement released on his Facebook and Instagram pages, Davy completely deflected the blame and minimized the situation, saying, "If it was a woman in my place, what would you do? Various videos have been circulating of unfaithful women, but they haven't been made fun of as much as me. I hope you never have to be in my position. I'm going to defend my honor and my pride as a man until the end. We all fail and we all repent. Thank you to those who've invited me to church. And if I go, it is so I can heal my family. No one is going to be able to damage my image. God is big and strong. And these women who are criticizing me, I know too have cheated, but they still comment." And aside from confirming that the lady in question wasn't his wife, Davy would also reveal that the incident had actually ended his relationship with his partner, as he continued saying, "You've already destroyed my relationship. What more do you want? I hope this doesn't serve you in any way, because you're only hurting a son of God. You don't know the psychological damage you've caused with your hatred directed at me. Everyone fails, and we can forgive from our hearts. God, give me strength." But the more he spoke, the more furious the public became, and many online users were surprised by his statement and criticized him for not admitting he was wrong. And not long after posting this statement, Davy also posted an update about his partner's decision, saying, "Regardless, my relationship is over, and I just have to continue. I regret what I did, but I can't beg for more forgiveness. I will not fail again, and I know I'm going to find a person who loves and accepts me. People always look for the bad in others." But then, contradicting his earlier confession, Davy quickly attempted to rewrite the whole incident by saying, "In my defense, I want to clarify that at no point I was dying to kiss my friend, and besides, there's no kiss in the video. I don't know why they say we kissed passionately when there wasn't even a touch of our lips. They only judge and criticize me, but nobody puts themselves in my shoes. God forbid the same thing happens to them. I'm innocent of the mockery. I want to go back to living these moments by your side, my lovely. I'm really sorry, and this is why I've come out in public to comment on this nonsense, so I can ask you to forgive me here on Instagram. I'm so confused, but I want to get you back." At the end of the day, Davy ended up paying a steep price for his infidelity, but this next sports fan left an entire stadium confused after doing something illegal on camera.
This Timberwolves fan caught on cam scores a snow during a live game. Televised, that's so hard, man.
On May 25th, 2025, the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Golden State Warriors faced off at the Target Center for a fierce showdown. For the most part, the match was uneventful though, but as soon as the Wolves beat the Warriors to secure their Western Conference final position, there was widespread jubilation among the fans. And in the middle of the celebration, the cameras just briefly panned across the crowd. And that was when viewers noticed a man who, instead of cheering or high-fiving those around him, casually poured a mysterious white substance onto the back of his right hand. Completely unbothered by the thousands of eyes and multiple cameras around him, he raised his hand to his nose and appeared to snort the substance. Now within minutes, this clip exploded across TikTok and Reddit, racking up more than 332,000 views not long after it was posted. And fans speculated wildly about what he was doing. Because while some people found the situation hilarious, unable to believe someone would do something so bold on live camera, others were outright disturbed, pointing out that children and families were seated nearby.
This might be something else, maybe snuff or salts. Nobody makes that face when they do that stuff. Maybe it was his first time or something, but that was way too casual. To be fair, I don't think that's creatine. I'm like 75% sure it's snuff. Is C considered okay now? Have I missed another culturally degenerate milestone? Bro about to lose his job over a Timberwolves game.
Now we might never know what the substance actually was, and are only left speculating. What comes next, however, is even more disturbing, since the fan did it solely because she wanted the cameras to capture her.
An anonymous New York player allegedly paid an OnlyFans model, Ava Louise, an undisclosed amount and comped her tickets to flash the New Orleans sideline as a distraction.
It began as just another end-of-year game on Sunday, December 8th, 2024, at MetLife Stadium and Meadowlands, with the New York Giants and New Orleans Saints, thousands of fans, and the usual chaos of late-season football. Now, a few days before the match, adult content creator Ava Louise took to Instagram to announce that she'd been approached and offered a free match ticket by one of the New York Giants players to carry out a stunt during the game. And later on her IG story, Ava shared a screenshot of her conversation with the player via her Instagram stories. But since she didn't include the name, fans were left wondering who could have contacted her for the stunt. And for someone known to court controversy, it wasn't surprising that Ava would be attempting to pull a stunt that could potentially get her banned from the stadium or any sporting event forever, as she'd been involved in other similar incidents in the past. Back in 2023, for example, Ava was kicked out of an NFL game for flashing her chest. And in May 2024, she also went viral for flashing the connecting portal between New York and Dublin before being chased out the area by park employees. Now, a few months later, on September 19th, 2024, she was then caught on video flashing her front end towards the United States President Donald Trump during a rally on Long Island, New York. The video of the incident immediately went viral on social media, with several reports suggesting that Ava could be facing criminal charges for flashing in public. But luckily for her, the Secret Service didn't think the situation was serious enough to actually get her in trouble. And Ava claimed that she was able to talk to one of the agents and convince him to let her and her boyfriend leave without any more trouble. But it wasn't just about seeking attention, as Ava was being paid to expose herself by unknown individuals. After the Trump stunt, for example, Ava told the media that the stunts were all about making money.
I make 100k a month now, after flashing the portal. I'm trying to make 500k off my Trump-themed content to give to Donald. Trump was an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. I understand him.
So fast forward to the night of the Giants game, Ava was seen at the MetLife Stadium, and while the match was going on, she suddenly stood up and again flashed her chest towards the field. This spicy moment was caught on camera, and within minutes, the clip was already trending across social media. And she would later post these censored pictures of the moment with the caption,
"Doing what I do for a living has its perks."
But even though she ended up facing a lot of backlash from fans who called her out for public indecency in a place filled with children, Ava still didn't end up facing any form of consequences for her actions, and it's quite likely that she will continue repeating the same stunt. This next case, however, involves a couple who went viral at the wrongest time and paid dearly for it.
Oh, look at these two. Either they're living in a fair or they're just very shy.
It's July 18th, 2025. The famous rock band Coldplay is hosting a concert at Gillette Stadium in Hillsborough, Boston. But in the middle of what started as just another show, something dramatic would suddenly happen, triggering investigations, resignations, and the end of two families within a matter of days. It started innocently as head singer Chris Martin asked the fan cameras to scan the crowd for his Jumbotron song, a common practice during the tour where he would sing a few lines about whoever the camera lands on. Now eventually the fan cam lands on a couple cuddling and smiling, but as soon as the couple realized that they'd been projected onto the big screen, everything changed. Instead of smiling or giving a playful kiss, their faces snapped into panic as they quickly separated.
Oh, look at these two. Either they're living in a fair or they're just very shy.
Now 28-year-old Grace Springer, who also attended the concert, was lucky to capture the moment on the phone, and according to her, the couple's reaction prompted her to post the video on TikTok, and within hours the clip went viral, and before the night was over, the internet had identified the man in the video as Andy Bryant, the CEO of a software development company called Astronomer. And the woman beside him was Kristen Cabot, astronomer's head of human resources. Both were married, but just not to each other. And so for the next couple of days, both Kristen and Andy would face heavy backlash online, as millions of people who saw the video criticized them for cheating on their partners as well as breaching workplace ethics.
LOL, if they just acted normal, this video probably would have never gone anywhere. 2 rules: never try to hide from the Jumbotron, and never run from the cops or dogs.
This clip would end up going so viral that it even became the most searched term on Google at one point. At the same time, Andy's LinkedIn was also flooded with thousands of comments forcing him to disable his account entirely. It also didn't take long for internet investigators to find his wife's Facebook account, bombarding it with heartfelt sympathy. But somewhere along the line, people noticed that Andy's wife had edited the name on her social media accounts, replacing her husband's surname with her maiden name, Kerrigan, triggering rumors that the two would end up getting divorced very soon. But that was just the beginning of the wave of consequences. Later on July 18, 2025, Astronomer made a post on Twitter announcing that both Andy and Kristen had been placed on leave and that the board of directors had launched an investigation. And just a day later, the company released a follow-up statement on LinkedIn announcing Andy's resignation.
Before this week, we were known as pioneer in the data ops space, helping data teams power everything from modern analytics to production AI. Our leaders are expected to set a standard in both conduct and accountability, and recently that standard was not met.
Following the incident, Kristen went completely silent and wouldn't get as much media coverage as Andy. However, multiple news outlets would later report that she'd also quietly resigned, which can be confirmed by the fact that both Kristen and Andy have been removed from the company's website. And a spokesperson close to Kristen's husband, Andrew Cabot, who's the CEO of an alcohol company called Privateer Run, revealed that Kristen and Andrew were privately separated several weeks before the actual Coldplay concert. But despite being exposed before the entire internet, Kristen continued to deny having a romantic relationship with her boss. According to a source close to her,
Kristen and Andy had an excellent working relationship, a great friendship, but there was no affair. It was inappropriate to be hugging your boss at a concert, and she accepts full responsibility for it. But the scandal, the downfall, the loss of the job, all of that is unfair. Kristen had people standing outside her car while she was picking her son up from work. Grown women laughing, taking pictures, pointing. It's been a tough thing to watch. In the first 3 days after the news broke, she had about 900 death threats on her phone.
the source says.
And it's overall the mockery made of someone, the way people really seem to enjoy it, and feel as though if somebody makes a mistake, public shaming is absolutely on the table as a punishment.
Right now, she's making sure her kids are okay, and that's going to take time. What comes next, however, is more unsettling since it involves a random act of violence at a sporting event.
As a paramedic, he spent his life saving others, but a brutal attack at a baseball game left him fighting for his own life.
March 31st, 2011 was supposed to be another opening day at Dodger Stadium with over 50,000 fans in attendance. The Los Angeles Dodgers had just stunned their rival, world champion San Francisco Giants 2-1. But shortly afterwards, a highly disturbing incident would erupt at the stadium parking lot. And within a matter of minutes, the entire area would be filled with the sounds of sirens blaring and emergency responders all rushing to the scene.
March 31st, 2011, in the parking lot of Dodger Stadium on opening day.
Brian Stowe, a 42-year-old paramedic and Giants fan who happens to be in attendance, was reported to have been viciously attacked unprovoked and beaten into coma by 2 Dodgers fans. In his defense, he was wearing a San Francisco Giants shirt. Brian was just talking with his work buddies while walking towards the parking lot when the attackers suddenly sucker punched him so hard that he fell headfirst on the concrete. He was then kicked in the head and torso as well, causing him to suffer severe brain damage so bad that his brain began to swell. And when he was eventually taken to the hospital for treatment, he was placed in a medically induced coma. The attack was so terrible that a part of his brain had to be removed to actually reduce its swelling. And on April 1st, 2011, which was the day after the attack, the police asked for the public's help in identifying and arresting the 2 men as they released composite sketches of the persons of interest, created by forensic artists based on the description given by an eyewitness. And speaking at a press conference, LAPD detective Percy Morris announced that the 2 suspects were between the ages of 18 to 25, and both had shaved heads and thin mustaches, and one of them reportedly had a small goatee, while the other had numerous tattoos on his neck. Now on the 6th of April 2011, just a few days after the incident, a vigil attended by clergy members, community activists, Dodger fans, and Brian's family was held outside the county USC Medical Center, where he was admitted following the attack. Now after the event, Brian's doctors actually gave an update on his condition. They revealed that he'd suffered a severe skull fracture and bad bruising to his frontal lobe, which even in the best case, has him facing a very long recovery process. It was also revealed that he remained in critical but stable condition. On April 5th, 2011, the Los Angeles City Council then approved $50,000 as a reward for information that could lead to the arrest and conviction of the people responsible for beating Brian. And the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors later unanimously approved another $10,000 for the same cause. The Dodgers then pledged a sum of $25,000 to catch the culprits, while another $10,000 reward was offered by the Giants. In addition, Brian's employer, American Medical Response, would also promise an additional $5,000. And so the police department also continued to work on tips and leads as LAPD detectives responded on April 17, 2011, sharing flyers of the sketches to Dodger Stadium employees and fans during the weekend series against the Cardinals, with the hope that the attackers might be in attendance or someone who knew them would later identify them. Now, nearly 6 weeks after the attack on Brian, over 300 billboards were installed installed across different locations in Southern California. A high number of them, of course, were positioned near Dodger Stadium in an effort to generate leads from the public. Now, on May 22nd, 2011, the search finally got a break after a suspect, who would later be identified as Giovanni Ramirez, was arrested following a police raid on a supposed hideout. Giovanni had been outed by his parole officer, who noticed a resemblance with the police sketch, and was immediately held on a $1 million bail. But the story wouldn't end in such a simple manner, unfortunately. It began when a lawyer named Chip Matthews, who was actually representing Giovanni's daughter, insisted that he had a solid alibi, arguing that Giovanni wasn't even at the stadium at the time of the incident.
He was spending the entire day actually at the Clinton Street address with his daughter, some other family members, and his girlfriend. We're going to be talking with the police first thing in the morning. We're going to set up an interview with the detectives to get them all the information.
Another attorney named Louis Shapiro, who'd been following the case as an independent analyst, would also later highlight some more discrepancies in the case, saying,
"There's no blood, no DNA recovered, and it's all about ID in this case. And if the ID does not match up, there's not much left."
So while Giovanni was still held in jail, his lawyer decided to file a lawsuit against the LAPD, accusing them of declaring him as the attacker without any actual evidence. He also claimed that between his arrest on May 22nd and July 22nd, Police Chief Charlie Beck made numerous false and defamatory statements to the media that Giovanni was the principal perpetrator of the attack. The lawsuit also mentioned that several people had confirmed Giovanni's alibi. So while he sat in jail for a crime he didn't commit, the real attackers were apparently still out there. And to back up all their claims, Giovanni's lawyer also claimed to be in possession of video evidence that will set their client free. According to them, the surveillance camera at the hotel where Giovanni stayed a day after the incident captured him with a head full of hair, while the sketches provided by the authorities showed two suspects with shaved heads. And so, reacting to the lawsuit, LAPD Commander Andrew Smith released a statement of his own, disclosing that they'd carried out Giovanni's arrest the right way.
Mr. Ramirez is of course free to file whatever lawsuits he and his lawyer want. It's important to note that it was the same department and chief that continued the investigation into the matter after Ramirez's arrest. Remember that Mr. Ramirez was arrested because he was on parole and had access to a gun, not for the Brian Stowe beating. Also, our investigation led to the subsequent arrests. We went there where the evidence took us and continued pursuing the matter to be certain we had all the evidence and the right suspects.
And so shortly after the back and forth, a federal judge dismissed Giovanni's claims, ruling that due process wasn't violated because the police had not criminally charged him for the Brian beating. The court also ruled that his Fourth Amendment rights were infringed upon during a search of his residence because he was on parole and subject to such searches. Now, a few months later, the case was pulled from the LAPD and reassigned to the Robbery Homicide Division, and that was where new leads began to open. First, the investigators were tipped off about a Dodgers jersey that had been dropped off at a laundry store by an unknown person. Unfortunately, this sample could not be immediately confirmed, as the clothes had been cleaned before the investigators actually got there, making it difficult to make sure if the clothes were actually linked to the Brian incident. But on July 22nd, 2011, the case was cracked wide open as LAPD announced the arrest of 3 new suspects. The 2 main suspects, Luis Sanchez and Marvin Norwood, who were arrested alongside a female, Doreen Sanchez, were immediately charged with mayhem and battery as well as inflicting great bodily injury, and both were felony offenses. And according to the district attorney's offices, the conviction on the charges could lead to serious jail terms. The charges for Doreen, however, were dropped by the district attorney. And so following the latest arrest, Giovanni was actually finally cleared and released on July 22nd, 2011. And also following searches of his phone records, surveillance footage around the crime scene, as well as his financial records, LAPD couldn't ever find any concrete evidence that linked him with the crime. And so surprisingly, despite spending months in detention, LAPD never formally charged Giovanni for the Brian beating. Now on February 18th, 2014, the defendants, Luis and Marvin, accepted a plea agreement to avoid heavier sentences. However, details about what happened that night were laid bare during the trial. Witnesses testified that Luis had gotten drunk and was looking to brawl with Giants fans seated near him on the day of the incident. He reportedly took part in about 4 other attacks at the stadium on the night of the game. And before the altercation involving Brian and his friends, Luis also threw a drink at a woman inside the Dodger Stadium. He also went as far as throwing peanut shells and sunflower seeds at some of the Giants fans inside the ballpark, as well as swearing at them, and all while the game was actually still going on. Now, as soon as the game was over, Luis ran at a group of men, swung a fist at one before then approaching Brian and his friends. Now, during the first argument with Brian, Luis allegedly pushed him and punched another unidentified man, and then Brian and his friends continued walking towards the edge of the parking lot despite this. But Luis and Marvin allegedly attacked them again, a few feet from the side of the first confrontation. And even though Brian and his friends had walked away, Luis and Marvin continued to follow them in the stadium parking lot before Luis then suddenly punched him in the side of the head, knocking him to the ground head first, according to court filings. Brian's friends, who were paramedics, described that he immediately lost consciousness and fell sideways to the ground without breaking his fall. When his head hit the ground, witnesses heard his head impact the concrete and saw it bounce. Defendant Luis then kicked the unconscious Brian several times in the head. Defendant Marvin also approached Brian and kicked him. In addition to the attack on Brian, Luis was also accused of knocking one of Brian's friends to the ground before attacking Brian from behind. Now, during the trial, secretly recorded tapes of suspects were also played by the prosecutors. Unaware that they were being recorded, Luis and Marvin acknowledged their involvement in the attack during a series of secretly recorded jailhouse conversations. Marvin especially was recorded admitting to his mother during a phone call that he was involved and saying,
"I will certainly go down for it."
And so this was the final nail in the coffin for the 2 suspects. And so on the 20th of February 2014, and so by the time the trial was over, Luis was sentenced to 8 years in prison, having pleaded guilty to 1 count of causing mayhem. Marvin pleaded guilty to aggression conviction and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. But while the sentencing brought some relief, Brian's family remained focused on the far bigger battle, his recovery. The father of 2 had to relearn how to breathe, speak, write, and talk. He also struggled with memory loss and performing basic daily functions. And because of his condition, Brian had to be cared for around the clock by his elderly parents who'd become his primary caretaker. And so because of this development, Brian's family decided to sue the Dodgers for lifetime medical bills that were projected to cost around $38 million, claiming that the Dodgers were negligent for providing insufficient security during the team's opener in 2011. And following a short legal battle, the case would come to a close on July 9th, 2014, after a jury of 9 awarded the sum of $18 million in damages to Brian. But as unsettling as the story is, the next one is even more tragic since it involves people losing their lives to a freak accident.
It's supposed to be a day of celebration. One hopes the stand doesn't burn down.
It's Saturday, May 11th, 1985. The Valley Parade Stadium in Bradford is filled with a charged atmosphere, as fans are excited to witness the final game of the Football League 3rd Division season between Bradford City and Lincoln City. Earlier before the match, Bradford City had just been presented with their championship trophy ahead of the match with Lincoln City since they were at the top of the table. But still, the stadium was packed, and everything was going as expected until around 3:40 p.m. when the commentator spotted a small fire from the stands.
And we've actually got a fire in the stand on the far side of the ground. And that looks very nasty indeed. Now the police have gone over there to try and quell the fire.
Within minutes, the entire stand had been engulfed in flames as people ran to safety, while the police tried to evacuate. But unfortunately, the conditions in the stadium were perfect for the fire to spread. The wind was blowing heavy, and the roof, which was made of flammable material called bitumen, only served as fuel for the fire. And not long after the fire started, burning roofing logs and molten materials started falling from the roof onto the crowd and seating below. At this point, many of the spectators who tried to escape found it difficult as the entire passageway was covered with smoke. Some spectators made their way into the field though, forcing the match officials to call off the game. In the footage of the incident, you can see the level of confusion that enveloped the spectators, because while many were trying to escape to the pitch or neighboring stands, it was the exact opposite for some others. Quite a large percentage of the spectators were observed cheering or waving to the pitchside cameras as the fire ravaged. When in the midst of the chaos, some of the spectators who were brave enough tried to put out the fire. Unfortunately, those efforts couldn't yield any results as there weren't any fire extinguishers in sight. And so as more time passed, the fire would only grow bigger and bigger. And to make the whole situation even worse, most of the exits at the back of the stands were also locked from behind, making it impossible for the fans to escape through those doors. And so in order to minimize the casualties, some of the players and coaching staff rushed into the stands, risking their own lives to pull trapped spectators to safety. But the most grim scene of all was when one old spectator made his way to the pitch completely on fire. And even though people managed to put out the flames and transported him to the hospital for emergency treatments, he still succumbed to his injuries shortly afterwards. Now firefighters soon arrived on the scene, but by then the fire had already burned up the whole stand, with only large balls of flames and smoke left behind. And since many of the fans still needed help getting out, the firefighters couldn't start putting out the fire right away, so it continued to wreak havoc. And so by the time the fire burned out, it was confirmed that 56 people had tragically passed on, many of which were a result of smoke inhalation. In addition to that, more than 265 fans would be treated for various degrees of injuries. Now some of the people who died were found still sitting up on their seat, covered by pieces of the roof that had fallen down, and the police had to work until 4 a.m. the next morning in order to recover all the bodies. Of the 56 people who died in the fire, 3 bodies were recovered along the toilet area. They'd lost their lives while trying to escape, and several other bodies were found around the exit and gates, as some had been crushed as they attempted to crawl under them to escape. Now following the incident, the immediate priority for Bradford citizens was to help the families affected by the disaster, and within 48 hours, an appeal fund had been set up, and donations poured in from solo events, fundraising events, and proceeds from re-recording of the Liverpool anthem, You'll Never Walk Alone. And in total, £4 million were raised. Now the tragedy received serious media attention and drew support from around the world, including a statement from the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, all offering their sympathy and condolences. Now following this event, there were several theories concerning what could have started the actual fire, one of which was started by a man named Martin Fletcher, who was one of the survivors of the incident. In his released book, he suggested that the fire had been started intentionally, insinuating that the fire might have been started as to claim insurance payment. And to actually prove this theory, Martin tried to create a link to a history of fires at businesses owned by the Bradford City chairman, Stafford Higginbotham, highlighting 8 different instances where a fire ended up with a large insurance payout. This claim, however, was countered by John Helm, another individual who'd witnessed the fire, and he instead said this.
Categorically, what happened was this. There was a man over from Australia visiting his son, and they got 2 tickets to the game. He lit a cigarette, and when it was coming to an end, he put it down onto the floorboard and tried to put his foot onto it to put it out. It slipped through a hole in the floorboard. A minute later, he saw a small plume of smoke, so he poured his coffee on it, and so did his son. It seemed to put it out, but a minute or so later, there was suddenly a bigger whoosh of smoke, so they went to get a steward. By the time they got back, the whole thing had taken off.
And so in the wake of the incident, the UK government would make the decision to ban wooden stands at all sports fields, while fans were also encouraged to refrain from smoking in the wooden stands that were still open. Now for many years after the incident, the identity of the person responsible for the fire was concealed from the public. That was until the 30th 30th anniversary of the fire when a number of news organizations named the man as Eric Bennett. But following this report, Leslie Brownlee, who was the nephew in question, was reported to have said that his uncle never admitted to starting the actual fire, and that he still believed that his uncle was innocent. And as tragic as this story is though, it's not the last time a lot of people lost their lives in a stadium on camera.
We started making our way down towards the front, then all of a sudden just sort of couldn't move, you just couldn't get anywhere then. Just like in a matter of seconds, you went from squeezing through people like the way we used to at the match, to just bang.
Incidents of violent fan behavior aren't uncommon in sporting stadiums all across the world. But in 1989, a tragic event took place in Sheffield, England, that completely changed the football world forever. It was Saturday, April 15th, 1989. The Hillsborough Stadium at Sheffield was preparing to host a semi-final match for the Football Association Challenge Cup between English clubs Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. The match, which was moved to a 54,000 capacity stadium, was already sold out before the day of the match, and kickoff was scheduled for 3 p.m. as fans were advised to take up positions 15 minutes before that, and radio and television broadcasters had also continuously advised anyone without a ticket since the stadium was already at capacity. The only problem was that Liverpool, which had a larger following between the two clubs, was allocated fewer tickets in order to curb any form of violent interactions between the two fan bases. And if that wasn't bad enough, the club was also assigned the smaller end of the stadium with a smaller entrance, which only had about 7 gates to handle the thousands of fans that had trooped in to watch the game. And as a result of the stadium layout and the segregation policy, Liverpool fans were forced to gather on the single entrance at Leppings Lane. Now, a few minutes before the actual kickoff, police officials who were brought in to control the crowd already sensed imminent danger, but they initially thought they could actually manage the situation. And at exactly 2:30 p.m, just 30 minutes before the start of the game, a little above 4,000 fans had already made their way to the stadium. But with kickoff fast approaching now, thousands of other fans were still actually waiting to get in. And the CCTV footage, which was also being monitored by the police that day, also showed how the crowd outside was growing by the minute. And so concerning officials who were obviously struggling with the crowd knew it was only a matter of time before injuries or crushes actually occurred. And so police officials even thought about delaying the start of the match, but later decided against it. And as the crowd just became bigger and bigger, officials did what they thought was the best option to manage the situation. At 2:52 p.m, they gave the order to open the gates and allow all the fans to enter over the next 5 minutes. And so more than 2,000 fans rushed in. Now inside the stadium, the fans who were able to get in were mostly heading to the crowded center pens, which were directly behind the Liverpool goal. So pretty much the best spots, despite the fact that there were plenty of spaces at either end of the terrace. Now the wired fencing between the pens made it difficult for fans to actually spread evenly. And so within minutes, several people were pressed against the steel fence at the front of the stands, immediately triggering a stampede. And many of the fans who were at the back didn't realize what was going on at the forefront until it was too late. A lot of the affected fans tried escaping the stampede by attempting to climb the perimeter fence, as those in the upper decks began lifting the ones from the lower deck to safety. And with the match now 6 minutes in, officials had no idea what was going on until a dividing fence on one of the pens collapsed, sending hundreds of people tumbling. And by the time the officials went up to the pitch to inform everyone that the game should be stopped, a serious chaos had unfolded and many people were already dead. At both the back and front of the pens, several other fans were trampled in desperation as they tried to escape. The intensity of the crush broke through more barriers on the terrace, as holes were made in the perimeter fencing by fans desperately attempting to rescue others. And the crowd in the Leppings Lane terrace spilled onto the pitch, where the many injured and traumatized fans would climb to safety gathered, and the entire disaster would be captured on camera and broadcast on the stadium screens. Meanwhile, on the pitch, police, stewards, and members of the St. John Ambulance Service were overwhelmed with the number of casualties, and so fans soon began tearing off advertising billboards as makeshift stretchers to move the injured out of the area for emergency treatment. And even though multiple ambulances were already dispatched, only 2 were able to make it into the stadium due to the crowd. And by the time the chaos settled down a little, 96 fans had been crushed, and out of these 96 people, only 14 were eventually transported to the hospitals for treatment. The rest had already passed away. Now 69 of those were under the age of 30, with the youngest being a who wasn't even a teenager. Many of the fans had been pressed so tightly in their pens that they'd suffocated while standing and passed away before anyone could actually get to them. Now in the following day after the incident, more than 200,000 people visited the memorial site inside the stadium. A disaster appeal fund was also immediately set up, with donations of £500,000 from the UK government, 100,000 from Liverpool FC, and 25,000 each from the cities of Liverpool, Sheffield, and Nottingham. And it wouldn't take long for donations to pass £1 million. And by the time the appeal closed a year later, in 1990, it had raised more than £12 million, with much of the money going to victims and relatives of those involved in the disaster. In the aftermath of the incident, several memorials have been erected in memory of the victims, and every year on April 15, the community in Liverpool and the football community in general host an annual memorial ceremony held at Anfield and at a church in Liverpool.